Welcome to the Peace of Living podcast. We're your hosts, Allison
and Jason,
and we are so glad to be back with you. We apologize for missing the last couple of weeks. That was not intentional. We fully intended on recording episodes, and it's been a very busy couple of weeks. I mean, every week it's busy, but in particular, we've had a lot going on these last 2 weeks, and one of them, well, I guess the past 2 weeks, I have been out of town, and one was for business, and the other one was just pure fun.
It's so fun.
It was so fun because we needed it. We definitely needed it. It was a little getaway, Jason and me alone. The first time that we have gone somewhere, just the two of us, that wasn't work related on a trip since 2017. Was it? Is that the last time?
Yeah, I think it's been like 6 years. So yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah.
So it was so awesome.
It was so awesome, but also it's also bad because I'm having a hard time coming back to reality after that.
Yeah.
And it's been almost 2 weeks, but I still am like, oh, remember when we were on that trip? That was like heaven.
I know.
It was a gift. It was a straight up gift.
It really was.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of a good way to transition into this because honestly, the last few podcast episodes that we've done, there's been something that's actually been weighing really heavily on our hearts that we've wanted to talk about, and we've pushed it off for a while because I didn't feel ready to talk about it. I needed more time to process it, and I didn't realize even until just yesterday that you needed time too, that this was still weighing really heavily on you. And it was good to talk about, but, being really cryptic, but, turns out that it actually has gotten harder to talk about. And so we wanted to podcast about this now and in almost like a therapeutic way. And hopefully our goal is to help someone, and sharing this experience that we really sincerely hope helps somebody. We hope it helps all of us just to be better people, more Christ-like, and more just thinking about what other people might be going through, which we just honestly have no idea. And a lot of people do know what we've been through. We're open about it and like willing to talk about it. It's just not something that we like bring up in regular conversation. But anyway, I know I'm beating around the bush a lot here. So a few weeks ago, well, I guess it's been just over a month now, I recorded a solo podcast about the antidote to worrying. Because at the time I was really worried. I was pregnant with our third baby, that really would have been our fourth baby, because we had lost Mary's twin. But anyway, it was my third pregnancy, and it was still a new thing. And I had just found out the week prior, and I just like all these fears and worries and the what ifs and all the things that could go wrong, and like my worst fears, and I couldn't even like say the word miscarriage before now because it was like this awful thing that I didn't want to even think could be a reality. Just because it was so sad to me, like the thought of losing a baby and knowing that so many people have gone through this. But so I was really scared about having another kid, because here's something they don't tell you about parenthood, because I just assumed that like, oh, we've done it, and so like it gets easier. But in my case, and you can speak up too, Jason, this doesn't have to just be my story.
Yeah, no, it's great.
I feel like I got more nervous the more time passed, because I became more aware of like all the things that could go wrong, and just loving our kids so much and being so scared of like the worst happening.
Yeah.
I don't know, that was a hard thing to face. And so I feel like that podcast episode, and I had a number of you reach out to me, which was so nice to you. You said that that really spoke to you. And I have to say, 100% that episode was just a gift from heaven for me. Because I didn't know at the time, I didn't know this, that our little baby whose heartbeat we had just seen the week before, had died, and we had lost this pregnancy. And I wouldn't know that for another couple days after recording that podcast. But, anyway, yeah, it's still hard to talk about, obviously, but, we're okay. I need to tell that to people that might be worried about us, thinking like, oh no, we need to like go visit them and talk to them. We'd love that. Obviously, we like hearing from people, but just know like we are okay. We're just sad. We're sad still, and we're still processing a lot of grief. I think you should speak up here and share your feelings so it's not just me talking.
Yeah, this has been I don't even really know all what to say, so I hope that what we're saying tonight will help someone. But this has been a really, really interesting experience to process. And like Allie mentioned, Mary was a twin. And so I find myself often thinking, wow, we would have had, 4 kids. And that's just crazy to think about. And I'm so grateful. Obviously we have Finn and Harry. They're amazing. But I guess one of the things that's been going through my mind is just the experience of just grief, and how it's so and how it just comes in waves, and it can be so complex. And I think that everybody's experience is different. With whether it's a death of a loved one, a parent or a grandparent or a friend or whoever, or a miscarriage. And I think through all of this, it's made me more compassionate to anyone going through grief or loss, because everybody's experience impacts them in their way. Like it's not like a universal, not everybody experiences it in the same way, I guess is what I'm saying. But everybody's experience, I think, is valid, and I've completely valid. And I don't know, like it's been surprising to me in some ways, like some of the emotions that I've felt, and some of them like feel at odds with each other. And it's a daily thing. Like some days I feel totally fine and normal, and other days like I do, like Allie said, I just like feel like really sad, and it's like, hard to go to work, and I just kind of want to come home and just be with Allie and the kids, because I mean, after all, that's what matters most, right? But through it all, one thing that I think we would say we both have experienced and still are experiencing, but especially when it was kind of new and people were starting to find out, and we kind of told, close friends and family and stuff like that, was just, and it was kind of cool that we were studying about when Paul was talking about God being the God of all comfort.
I have that in my notes. I was going to talk about that.
Well, yeah, bring it up, please. I want to hear your take, but just that line, I love that line from those verses. And I don't have it up in front of me, but basically like God comforts us so that we might also turn and comfort others. And I think what I was about to say is, I think we both would say that we've experienced God's comfort through like so many people. And it's been like super humbling to experience. And especially like there's been, I don't know, like support and love, and just kind notes from people we not necessarily wouldn't have even expected to hear from. And it's just reaffirmed my testimony that like, it's so cool that like, that President Kimball quote that we've shared so many times on this podcast, where he says that God does notice us. It's like he does notice us. He listens to our prayers, but it's usually through another person that he meets our needs. And yeah, holy cow. Like we've talked about being the body of Christ and on this podcast and everything. But I guess what I would say is I'm just, first of all, so grateful for people that have responded to the little nudges from the Spirit to say something, to do something, to show up in whatever way they felt to show up. And if I could just invite those listening to pay attention to those just thoughts and feelings and impressions you have, especially in regard to another person, because it very well could be the Lord, probably is the Lord, the Holy Ghost working through you to do his work, to like bring the comfort that he would bring if he were here. And I think it's really humbling that he allows us to be a part of that experience that he has in offering that kind of comfort. And I've just been so grateful, and it's just so humbling to see that in action.
So I apologize if I kind of speak haltingly through this, or if I have to take a lot of breaks, because it's still very near the surface for me. I think largely because, having kids is not easy for me. And so this baby, I mean, obviously all babies are miraculous. This one in particular was one that I think that we weren't sure was ever going to happen. And so the fact that this did happen on its own without like any medical or medicinal intervention at all, like we had with our previous pregnancy, it just felt like a gift. And I remember like the day that I found out that I was pregnant, just being shocked, but being like so happy, because I thought like, oh man, like this is a miracle. And I felt so much peace that day. And then every day after that, I kind of just felt fear. And I just had this feeling that something wasn't right. And we had seen the ultrasound with this baby's heartbeat and everything, and checked it out. Everything looked good. And then it was just crazy because, I mentioned I recorded that podcast all about how we need to trust him no matter what, because we can expect that hard things are going to happen. We're not going to be able to dodge that in our lives. And so if we go in with the mindset of like, basically like Jesus is coming with me to battle, no matter what I'm facing, he's going to be there with me. And I feel like that was the Lord preparing me for what was about to happen, because, and this is really bizarre. I hope that anybody listening to this, like if you're pregnant or if this happens to you in the future, please don't take my experience and think that this is going to happen to you. This was very personal to me, so I don't want to freak anybody out. I just want to make that very, very clear. This was personal to me. When a week after we'd had the ultrasound, the first one, when everything was fine, I just woke up one morning and just did not feel pregnant. I didn't have any food aversions, any sickness, the fatigue was completely gone. And that was the biggest thing. I was like, well, that's weird. Like it was literally an overnight thing. I went to bed feeling pregnant and I woke up feeling not pregnant. And at first I thought like, okay, I'm just having like a good day. So I'm not going to worry too much about it. And I did some reading, obviously online, as one does, as one is not supposed to do. But a lot of people were like, this happens a lot. Like symptoms can go up and down a lot with pregnancy. You shouldn't let that worry you too much. But then the next day when I woke up and felt completely normal, like no indication that I was pregnant at all, feelings wise. I just had this sense that something was wrong. And the reason why I was especially attuned to that is because it was around that same time in my pregnancy with Mary and her twin that I noticed a shift in my symptoms where I started to feel a lot better. But I still had pregnancy symptoms, but it was like a noticeable improvement.
Mm.
And that felt weird to me because I was only like, I was not done with the first trimester yet. I was still like in the 7-8 week mark. So pretty early on. And I having this same feeling again of like this noticeable improvement in symptoms was almost like this. I had this just inkling of like something isn't right. And I remember very clearly that day, because you had gone to work and it was just me and Mary at home. Finn was in school. And I kept saying prayers to like feel comfort and to know that everything was okay with this baby. I'm like, I have no reason to like be super worried about it. I don't have any alarming symptoms. It's just the fact that I'm feeling well that is scaring me, which is a weird thing to be worried about, you know? But I kept saying prayers, asking for comfort, you know, and instead of the reassurance that everything was okay, I actually got this feeling of like, you should reach out to your doctor. And when I got that impression, I had this sinking feeling of like, I just know that everything is not okay with this baby. And it's weird because when I later told my doctor about this feeling, she kind of marveled and she's like, you know, that's actually a really common thing for pregnant women when they reach a certain, like that point in their pregnancy for their symptoms to like disappear overnight. And then it turns out that everything is fine. But I was like, but I knew. I just, and I can't describe it to you. Like, what do you want me to say? I had a spiritual impression that things were not okay with my baby. And that was a really hard night because that was a Thursday. And I remember that because, like the next day was Friday. And that's when we found out for sure because we had the appointment to get the ultrasound. And even at the appointment, they were like, oh, everything's going to be okay. We'll just reassure you. We'll do a quick ultrasound and it's going to be fine. And sure enough, like, luckily Jason was with me. He was able to take that day off, which was so kind of his supervisor to give him that time. And another reason why you got that time is because your principal has been through this himself. And so he has that compassion. He has that empathy of knowing what that feels like. Mm-hmm. And so I was so glad that you were with me because like when they did that ultrasound and they couldn't find that heartbeat, like just having you there was so comforting because then I didn't fall into a complete mess and I didn't have to like call you and tell you you were there with me. And I was really grateful for that. But it was one of those things that it's like something bad was happening to us, but I could feel like this extra, I don't even know how to describe it. Just this feeling of like, I knew that he was so aware of us in that moment and that like he was with us and he knew that this was going to be a hard thing. And it was just the beginning of the hard thing.
Yeah.
And I almost felt like this, I would call it like a spiritual anesthetic of sorts because it was like he was cushioning the blow in the moment. Like, yes, I know. And I've tried to prepare you for this, that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's going to be okay. It's going to be hard and it's going to be sad and it's okay that it's hard and sad. And I will walk you through it, but it's going to be okay. And then just like Jason mentioned, there's just so many ways that we've seen his hand, especially like in that moment, in the epicenter of everything, when it was all happening so fast and this big change was going on. And anyway, I know I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I'm just reliving all of this, and it's just trying to gather my thoughts.
I remember when we first went to the IHC, or Intermountain Health as it is now, here in Bountiful, and on that Friday, and we were sitting outside in the waiting room, and it was kind of cool. Like, we were just sitting there kind of quietly, just holding hands, waiting to be called back for the ultrasound, and
there's no one else in the
there's no one else there. And it was like really cool. I don't necessarily think this was like a vision, but it kind of like felt that way. It was like really, really cool. But like, we were just sitting there, and it's like, I know I was in my head about it, but it's like I could see, in my mind, I could like imagine Jesus, like walking kind of briskly just around the corner with his hair kind of swaying, and just like locking eyes with us, like across the room. And in my mind, he kind of looked like the, Jonathan Rumi on The Chosen, but I had just like envisioned him like coming up to us, sitting there and looking down, and like just coming up to us and saying, "Are you guys okay?" And just kind of with his kind eyes and his smile. And I just, in my head, like felt like he said, like, "It's going to be okay." Just with that smile and those eyes. And even though I was imagining it, at least maybe I was, I don't really know, honestly. It felt pretty spiritual to me, but it like gave me a ton of comfort in that moment, because whether it was in my head or not, that's something I really think that, not that he would do, but that he was doing in that moment for us. It felt like he was one-on-one with us in that moment.
I think absolutely. Because in that moment, like, no one else knew. There wasn't anybody else to take that burden from us. It was only him. That was before we had the ultrasound, before it was confirmed. But he knew what was coming. And I think he for sure was preparing people to help us. And that started with our ultrasound tech. She confided in us. She shared that she'd gone through the same thing, that she'd had a miscarriage, and it was really, really hard on her. This was several years ago at this point for her, but it was a similar situation where she had 2 kids like we did, and she wasn't sure she was going to have another one. And there was this big gap between this baby and her next youngest, and how she said, like, when she lost that baby, that pregnancy, it like made her want to have another baby even more. And it was like another 2 years or something before she had their rainbow baby, but she was so sweet, and just took a lot of time talking to us, and just awesome. Validating our feelings, and just, like kind of telling us what to expect, and like how we could handle. She's like, everybody handles grief differently. Like, I didn't share it with anybody, and that is totally fine. I want to be clear about this too. Like, if you've been through a miscarriage and you haven't told anybody, I totally respect that. It's a hard thing to talk about, and you get to choose how you want to handle that grief.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's kind of a mix of like, I like talking about it with people that I can trust, because for me, it's therapeutic to talk. I don't like bottling things up, but at the same time, I don't like talking about it all the time, because obviously it's still hard, but that was like miracle number 1, I would say, is and that was surprising to me. Like, as we shared this news with people, we learned about so many people who had been through this, neighbors and friends and coworkers, that I had no idea, because this is such a common thing, but it's not something that gets talked about a lot. And I do wish that it was more talked about, just because I think for me, one of the big reasons why we're sharing this right now is because the reason why I was able to get through it in the moment, like the burden wasn't as bad, is because I could look to the people who had been through it, who had shared their stories.
Yeah.
And I say to myself, if they've been through this and they survived, I can too.
Yeah.
And I've also, I've learned so much from this process, and about like myself and about grief in general. And it's been really eye-opening, because I would say that, there definitely was a difference. And this is not, please, if you're listening to this and you have been among the people that have reached out, and I am not ranking anybody's response to our situation here, because everything has meant something to us.
Oh, so appreciated.
Whether you sent us a meal, or you sent flowers, or you visited in person, or you just called, or he baked us some treats or something, or even just sent a text message or whatever, like so many thoughtful gestures. And they were so timely too. That was the main thing, is like, I couldn't believe how many times, like I would be sitting at home like a week or two, even after, everything had happened, and feeling lonely and sad, just sitting in this grief. And someone would just out of the blue text or call me, and I'm like, well, okay. Like,
Yeah.
he's looking out for us. But I will say that I did notice a particular difference in people that had been through this same experience and their response to this. And it's not necessarily that they went through a miscarriage, but those that had an experience with grief and loss.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like they knew exactly what to say, and they knew how to be there. And that's something that I need to be careful about, is not judging people for not showing up the way that I expect them to, or the way that I want them to, when you're going through something that's hard. Because I think a lot of times people just don't know what to do or say. They want to help,
Yeah.
but they don't know what to do or how to do that. And I've definitely found myself in that situation where I'm like, I know you're in pain, and I want so badly to be able to help you, but I don't want to make it worse either. Like, what do I do? Do I give you space to grieve, or do I show up and just smother you with love, or what do you need? And that's hard, and that's an individual thing.
Yeah.
Because everybody's different in how they handle grief. But it was a lesson to me it gave me ideas for how to show up for people, because I was also regretting the times that friends and family and neighbors and people that had gone through hard things, I'm like, I should have done more. I should have done more for them. But now I just know, going forward, like, okay, if anybody goes through this, like, I want to be there for them. And I've seen good ways of how that's done. And I think you kind of mentioned this earlier, didn't you? Or maybe this was in my head at this point. I don't know. Just how, when you get that prompting, when you get that nudge to go do something for someone, like, that's God using you as his hands to go be there for someone. And how we shouldn't ignore that. And I'm trying to be better about acting on those promptings, and, not suppressing the generous thought, like Sister Kimball said to the girl Susan in the story that Sister Craig quoted, right? But I had listened to a podcast recently that this guy was talking about receiving spiritual impressions, and like, was that from God, or was that from me? And should I actually take this action, do this thing, And he said that, like, more often than not, when you get an impression to do something good, it usually is followed by an adversarial impression to not do that thing. for whatever reason. There's some excuse, but I'm so grateful to the people that showed up in the ways that they could. Even if they felt like it didn't make a whole lot of sense to them why they were doing this thing. And I do have a specific experience that I wanted to share, and I hope it doesn't embarrass her too badly, but she deserves a shout out because she's amazing. Your sister Sarah. Sarah, I know you're gonna listen to this, Sarah. And I hope that you know, because now it's recorded forever, that you made a big difference for me. Here they come again. So our anniversary was the week after I'd had a D&C and everything, and was still in the healing process. And it just so happened that it fell on a Thursday. So you were teaching Institute that day, and we'd already known that like we basically weren't going to be able to celebrate our anniversary that day because you'd be gone till late at night, and it was fine, like, but I felt like extra lonely that day because, like, of course I wanted to be with you. But it was around dinner time. It was just me and the kids, and I was feeling a little sad, because it was a big anniversary, 10 years, and I just wanted to be with you, and not just because it was our anniversary, but because like I was still sad and like just grieving. And there was a knock on our door, and I answered it, and it was Sarah, your sister, and she had walked Winston, your parents' little golden doodle puppy that's adorable, up the street, and she stopped at our house, and she came in, and it was just like a nice surprise just to see her, because we don't often get family members just randomly dropping in on our house, because it's not like it's not a huge gathering place. There's not a whole lot of space here, but it's great. We love our house, but it's rare that people just like drop in. And so it was just nice to have Sarah drop in that night. And I made her stay for dinner with us with our cheapo little homemade grilled cheese sandwiches. And she was sweet to do that. But so Sarah shows up and she says like, "Hey, I have something for you." And she was kind of like timid about it. I could tell like she wasn't sure how I'd feel about this thing that she's giving me. And she hands me this necklace, and it's this gold necklace, and it has this tiny little daisy imprinted on this kind of gold circle. And she explained that she'd read that the daisy was the April birth flower, which April was the month that our baby would have been born, and that the daisy also represented grieving parents, who, because they would leave like daisies on the graves of their lost children, and she kind of was like almost apologetic handing me this necklace. And she's like, I didn't give it to you for a while because I felt dumb. I didn't know if you think it was silly or whatever. And I was just like, I burst into tears when she gave it to me because that meant so much to me. It means so much to me. I'd been trying to think of a way to like honor this baby because it's not something that I want to forget. I don't want to just be like, oh, I'm over it. Like to me, like this was my child. I saw his or her heartbeat and we lost them, And so I don't ever want to forget this baby. And so the fact that she came was something that I could keep and wear and remember this baby by was so touching to me. And the fact that she showed up on our anniversary when I was feeling lonely and extra sad, like it it just meant so much to me because like not only was I celebrating 10 years of being married to you, but I was celebrating 10 years of being in your family, in this family, which is now my family. And I just, I loved that she showed up then. Like her timing was perfect. And Sarah, you might not think that, but that little gesture was huge and it meant everything to me. And I love that necklace, and I wear that little daisy pendant on the gold chain that has my young women's temple medallion on it too. And it will always serve as this constant reminder to me of both my baby and of my sister-in-law. I don't even like saying sister-in-law. I'm like, my sister. I think of her as much my sister as yours, being there for me, even when she felt like maybe a little sheepish in doing it. And so just do whatever you feel prompted to do, because even like some harebrained idea, and that wasn't a harebrained idea, that was sweet and genuine and from the heart and so meaningful. But like if something even like random comes to your mind of something that you can do for someone, there's probably a purpose to it, and just go with it.
Yeah, even like last week, and I have no idea if he's listening, but a buddy of mine in the ward, Kellen, and this is many weeks after the fact at this point. And I don't know if he knows what's gone on or not, but
I don't know.
Have no idea. But I just get this text at like 8:00 at night, and we don't like text regularly. I love Kellen. I think we're pretty good buddies and pretty good friends. But so I got a text from him 8:00 at night, and he's just like, "Hey, are you home?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like what's up?" And he's like, "I'm going to drop something by." And so, okay. And so like a few minutes later, Kellen's on my doorstep, our doorstep, with just cookies. And, it meant a whole lot. I felt kind of dumb because I didn't really know what to say. I was just really, really grateful. And he was just like, yeah, sometimes when I get the thought about someone, I just sometimes think I should make them cookies. And he's like, and I don't question it. I just make him cookies and I take him over. And that's what he did. And he didn't really ask what was going on. He just said, I thought I should make you cookies. And I didn't have a whole lot to say. Like I said, I felt a little dumb because there wasn't much conversation, just because I was kind of just overwhelmed by the kindness and the thoughtfulness. But you just don't know what even like a small gesture will do. And he's just God is looking out for you. And gosh, I wish that he could just like sit with us all the time. But I guess that's what family and friends are for, right? And
Absolutely.
The Ward family, ideally.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, like we've just learned so much from this experience, and we're, we try not to compare our suffering with anyone else's, because there's so many weird emotions with something like this, because there's like the guilt for still feeling bad about it. And should I feel bad? Do I have the right to feel bad? Like there's other people that have been through way worse things. And when you start to do something like that, like I just think that God, he doesn't compare our sufferings. And he's like, you know what? You should really get over it, because you don't have it as bad as so-and-so.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there are a lot of lessons coming to me for this. And one being act on the promptings, like we said. Like Kellen is such a great example. Kellen and Sarah and so many more. Oh goodness.
So many.
Like, please know, if you're listening to this, you probably are one of the angels that has reached out to us in the last month. And a lot of you don't even know. It's not like we haven't made this super public knowledge to everybody. I mean, a lot of people do know, but a lot of people don't. So even if like you have reached out to us in any way, like it just means a lot. And another takeaway for me. So last week I was traveling for another work assignment, another car event, because this is who I am now. And I don't know. I just so prefer to I'm such a homebody and I just love being, if I'm going to travel, I want to travel with Jason and the kids or even just Jason. but
especially me.
Especially you. Yes. Cause it's just, I don't love being away from my family, you know? And so it's actually hard for me even when I'm gone for like 2 nights, which was the case. I went back to Palm Springs. This time it was for a Chevy event. And this time, like, I didn't know anybody at this event. There were no familiar faces at all. And it was a good experience. I'm glad that I went. I know I needed to go. And I'm grateful for these opportunities for sure. But like, man, I had the thought while I was there and I'm like chatting and getting to know people. Like I just was thinking like, man, like these people, they have no idea like what kind of a month it's been for me and for my family. Like they have no idea what I've been through, you know? And then this voice in my head that I'm sure was not mine said to me, you have no idea what they've been through. And it like really stopped me because it changes the way you interact with people.
Yeah.
And I think it's that really famous President Eyring quote when he's like, treat people as if they're going through they're in serious trouble or something like that. And more than half the time you'll be right. And I just need to remember that, like with every human being, like literally, like every single person you come across, like even if someone's being mean, there's usually a reason to that. And like,
it's usually because they're hurt.
Hurt. Like it's the old saying that hurt people hurt people.
Yeah. And
it's not that I'm excusing bad behavior or whatever, but I'm just trying to be more patient with humans in general because mortality is hard. And that's something that Jason and I were talking about this last night because we had like a little disagreement moment and I'm actually glad that it happened because it brought to a head that we were both still grieving. We're both still going through that process of healing, you know? And I don't know how long that will take. It may never end. Maybe it'll be the rest of our lives. We'll just be constantly just healing and I don't want to say getting over, but just moving through this experience and what we've learned from it. And I just want to say, because again, everyone handles grief differently. There can be that temptation when something bad happens to turn your anger toward God. And I am not judging you for that if that has happened to you, because life is hard and pain is real. And sometimes like it is easy just to be like, hey, you're all powerful. Why didn't you stop this thing? And thankfully, I'm really grateful that that hasn't been the case for us. But I will say this, that as time has gone on, like we mentioned, being at the epicenter of it when it was all new and we had just learned about it and people learned about it and they were extra kind and there were extra prayers for us, you could feel that cushion from heaven. And as time has gone on, I almost would say that right now is harder than it was a month ago.
I agree.
Because it feels more lonely and quiet. And it's not that I don't expect all this attention and people fawning on me. I don't want that. But it's just like, there is a certain loneliness to the point when like you have to get back to normal and you have to move on with life, but you almost don't want to. Like you want to stay in that embrace of heavens for so long. And so I think for me, almost there came this temptation of like, oh, wait, well, where's God now? Like, why don't I feel him as strongly now as I did when this was happening? And I was telling Jason, like, it seems like all these things happen when I'm in the shower, when I can think clearly, you know, but like, I had this distinct thought that was almost like anger, but it wasn't directed at God. It was directed at Satan. And I was like, how dare you take this opportunity to ruin my relationship with God? This sad,
Yeah.
tragic thing that had happened in my life,
Yeah.
you are trying to exploit to get me to distance myself from God, who is the only source of peace through all of this.
Yeah.
The only way that I can cope with being human and dealing with hard things is through him and the peace that he provides.
Yeah.
You and I were talking about and listening to Follow Him had a really great episode. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'll have to look up what his name was because I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say it was Dr. Larry Nelson.
I think so.
Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Oh man, please go and listen to these episodes. It was the 2 Corinthians 1-7 episodes, which is what we were quoting. The 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 1-5 is what I was going to share about how God is the God of comfort. These episodes that Dr. Larry Nelson recorded on Come Follow Him, they like jumped out at me because again, of like everything that we've been going through, but he basically drives home the point that like God is never the author of our pain. That those are the conditions of mortality that we agree to when we come here. Sometimes our pain happens because of our own choices or the choices of others, and sometimes it's just because we live in a fallen world. And in our case with the miscarriage, that's a fallen world circumstance. I don't personally believe that God was like, you know what these guys need? They really need a miscarriage to learn a thing or two. No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I don't think that he would ever have said, this is what I'm going to do to them. I think that he knew that for whatever reason, this baby's life was not going to be viable, and he cushioned us through it. He softened the blow,
Yeah.
and he prepared me specifically for this. And I know that everything that he does is for my good and benefit. And that I need him when I'm going through the hard times, which we're going to keep going through hard times. You know, there may be another miscarriage in the future. There may be something even worse. And I don't like thinking that way, but I have to understand that that is life. Life is going to keep being life. And he is going to be there for us every time something like this happens.
Yeah, I've got a super nerdy thought that came to me as you were talking, and you know, you put it like we were in the epicenter. We received, you know, so much of comfort and a cushion, as you said, and clearly he was with us. And then kind of now coming down on the other side of that, it's a very strange experience.
The aftershock.
It's the aftershock, right? But it reminded me of, and it seems like we can't go a podcast episode without making a Lord of the Rings reference. But as you were talking, it made me think of just how, like with the fellowship, and especially with, you know, Frodo and Sam when they're literally on like Mount Doom, they'd had help. They had help. And literally were carried through that. And then, like, as harrowing as that experience was, something that's like, and we've mentioned this before on this podcast, but something that's always stuck with me from those movies and books. Yes, Mount Doom, but it was when they came back.
Yeah.
And in the movie, this isn't a quote from the book, but Frodo's voiceover, Elijah Wood, right, says that, and thus it was, a fourth age of Middle Earth began, and the fellowship of the ring, though eternally bound by friendship and love, was ended. 13 months to the day since Gandalf sent us on our long journey, we found ourselves looking upon a familiar sight. We were home. How do you pick up the threads of an old life? How do you go on when in your heart you begin to understand that there is no going back? And there are some things that time just cannot mend, and some hurts that go too deep, that have taken hold. Bilbo once told me that his part in the story tale would end, and that each of us must come and go in the telling. But the thought that came to me as you were talking was, God is with us in the storm, but he's also like with us on the other side. And the harder thing sometimes is picking up the threads, going back to work.
Yeah.
Sitting down at your computer and writing an article about something while your heart's just been broken. And that's tough. Like, that is tough. The epicenter is rough.
Yeah.
But getting up and driving to work, like the other day, literally this happened 2 days ago. It's like, I'm getting up so early, going to teach these classes, which have been really hard this try. And I just had the thought, like, why am I doing this? I just want to turn around and go home. But you have to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways that's the harder thing. But it also doesn't mean that he's not there with you in, like, the drive to work, the picking up the threads of before whatever happened and moving on. And admittedly, it has been harder to feel him and hear him in some ways, but there's been enough. There's been just enough for me to know that he's still there.
As you were talking, it made me think of, because I always compare it to our experience with our own kids. I'm so thankful we have our kids. This experience has made me that much more grateful for them. But I think as their mom, of course I'd want to be by them every second of every day, fighting their battles for them, making sure that they avoided as much pain as possible, and that I could be there watching Finn at recess or Mary at preschool and intervening if something was going to happen, or giving him a hug if he was sad at recess because, like, nobody was playing with him or something, or if Mary got her feelings hurt or something at preschool, like immediately comforting her. But that's not what a parent does. A parent has to send their kid out into the world and let them feel and experience things, and then know that they will always have a safe spot here.
Yeah.
When they come home, I will be here for you. I will be thinking about you all day, and I pray for you all the time. And obviously God is even better than us, because he is actively sending people to be with us along the way. And I know that there are angels in our children's paths and in our paths. And that's something that I wanted to suggest to anybody that's going through a hard time right now. I hope that this is applicable, obviously, not just in loss and in death or miscarriage specifically, but just like, if you're just feeling the weight of mortality, I hope that you can feel some hope. I hope that you know that he's there. And even if it doesn't feel like he's there, just trust that he is. And part of the test, part of faith, is pushing through when you don't feel bubbly and happy and light all the time. But when you feel those hard moments, and just knowing, even in your head, if you can't feel it in your heart, like, or vice versa, that he is there, and I trust that he is there. And that's kind of what I was getting at with my whole thing of my anger directed at Satan, that I'm like, I am not going to believe what you say that he's not there. I know he's there. I just know that I'm going to have to feel feelings.
Yeah.
That's part of being human. And the two talks that I wanted to suggest, because they were immense comfort to me, not only now, but in times before now when I've gone through difficult things. They're two of my most favorites. And the first one is Sunday Will Come by Elder Joseph B. Worthlin. And the second one is The Ministry of Angels by Elder Jeffrey R. Holland. Those two talks always just speak to my soul when I'm going through something hard and when I feel alone. So I highly recommend listening to them. But I can tell you want to say something.
Oh, just before you do, just what you were saying just goes along perfectly with, I wanted just to finish the rest of that quote because it goes along with what you just said. That's okay. Where he says, and he talks to Sam and he says, you cannot always be torn in two. You will have to you will have to be one and whole for many years. You have so much to enjoy and to be and to do. Your part in the story will go on. Like there were more adventures to be had.
Yeah.
The story's not done yet. And there's great things coming. Like we just have to go back to work and there's great things coming. Anyway.
Love that. And that is the hard thing, right? It's just like continuing on with normal life, because I think there's a part of us that like, we don't want to go back. Like once we've been through something, like the last thing that I want to do is be the same person I was before this all happened. I hope that's my biggest hope from this whole thing is I hope I'm a better person for this. I hope that I'm more compassionate. I hope that I see people more and that I'm more attuned to those spiritual impressions that I might get to do the random nice thing for somebody without even knowing why. Because I really strongly believe that like we are such a huge part of God's plan, and like he needs us to be his hands, right? Like the president, then President Uchtdorf, now Elder Uchtdorf talk of you are his hands. I wanted to maybe wrap up unless there was something more that you wanted to say.
I've got one quote after what you shared.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a quote too that I was going to end with. But
okay, well, I'll share this then first, and then you can end. So just real quick, I had an experience today that was like pretty powerful. So this morning in my first class of the day, so for our devotionals in seminary right now, I've been having the kids share thoughts from the new For Strength of Youth, a guide for making choices, which is really good. Anyway, the sweet girl gets up to share her thought, and she's kind of like lost her voice. So she starts talking and she's barely squeaking anything out. Poor girl. She was so sweet. And so she just like hands me her phone and she's like, can you just read this? And so I was like, sure. And so I read it for her. And I think she was actually like really inspired to choose this section from the new For Strength of Youth, because it was exactly what I needed to hear. And I hope it's what somebody else needs to hear, but it's from the section, Your Body is Sacred. And it's underneath at the very bottom of that section, it says, caring for your body includes caring for your mental and emotional health. And it said this, it says this, it's normal to feel sad or anxious from time to time. When you are unable to cope with those feelings and recover from them, that may be a sign of mental or emotional challenges that require help from a parent, leader, or doctor or professional counselor. Such help can be a blessing from your loving Father in heaven. If you ever have thoughts of harming yourself or ending your own life, seek help right away. Remember, you are loved, valued, and needed. Whatever your emotional or mental struggles may be, seek peace in Jesus Christ and his gospel. And I just want to echo that. If anybody needs to hear that, if you're struggling, remember that you are loved, valued, and needed. And whatever your emotional or mental struggles may be, seek the peace in Jesus Christ and his gospel. And it's okay, to feel sad or anxious from time to time. But at the same time, know that you're loved, by so many, and you are valued, and your feelings are valid. And we're in this together. Like, I'm just so grateful for the earthly family, all of us together that we have, because we truly can have each other's backs, and it's very comforting.
That's great. I'm so glad you had that experience today. Just another example of how he just shows up, right? And I wanted to end with a quote from that talk from Elder Holland of the Ministry of Angels. I really think this might be like my favorite talk of all time.
It's so good.
Just because I think all of us want to know that we're really not alone. And that God isn't just mindful of us, but that he sends people to us. Actual angels, And Elder Holland, this is toward the end of his talk. Again, go and read or listen to the whole thing because it's great. He says, "My beloved brothers and sisters, I testify of angels, both the heavenly and the mortal kind. In doing so, I am testifying that God never leaves us alone, never leaves us unaided in the challenges that we face. Nor will he, so long as time shall last, or the earth shall stand, or there shall be one man or woman or child upon the face thereof to be saved. On occasions, global or personal, we may feel we are distanced from God, shut out from heaven, lost, alone, in dark and dreary places. Often enough, that distress can be of our own making, but even the Father of us all is watching and assisting. And always there are those angels who come and go all around us, seen and unseen, known and unknown, mortal and immortal. May we all believe more readily in and have more gratitude for the Lord's promise as contained in one of the President Monson's favorite scriptures. I will go before your face. I will be on your right hand and on your left. My spirit shall be in your heart, and mine angels round about you to bear you up. In the process of praying for those angels to attend us, may we all try to be a little more angelic ourselves. With a kind word, a strong arm, a declaration of faith, and the covenant wherewith we have covenanted." I am resolving to be a little more angelic, like Elder Holland said. I'm going to try to remember that. And I'm also going to have patience with myself, because I don't want to set some sort of impossible bar here for me to meet. Like, okay, going forward from here on out, I'm going to be an angel and I'm never going to make any mistakes ever again. Like, that's just not realistic. I'm going to have my up and down days, and I have. And when those happen, I am learning to be kinder to myself and to just say, you know what? Being human's hard. And I had a hard day today, and I'm going to try again tomorrow, and I'm going to be better tomorrow. And so if that's you, if you are having a hard day, if you're not showing up as your best self because you're struggling, you have some pain yourself that you're working through, be patient with yourself and just know that it's going to be okay, that Jesus can help you through that he has patience with you. He will patiently work through this with you, and you will not be alone. So yeah, we just love you. Thank you for bearing with us through what's been a more somber podcast episode. We just really, we want you to know that, like, we are just real people. We go through this with you. We're experiencing mortality same as the rest of you, and we have our up days and we have our down days, and we're learning as we go, just like you. But we are even more committed to Jesus Christ and his gospel, and he is even more real to us now, having gone through this. And we're grateful for that. So thank you so much for listening. We love you all, and we will see you here next week. Thank you.